Welcome back to the Rehab Science Podcast, everyone. I am super pumped about today's episode. I've got my friend, fellow physical therapist, and entrepreneur, Pete Holman on. Pete, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
It is an honor. I mean, Dr. Tom, I've followed you for a while, and it's so weird. Social media is so weird because you feel like you literally know people, but I don't really know you. So this is as exciting for me, hopefully, as it is for you and your audience, because I get to know you, you get to know me, and hopefully we can dive into some PT and some sports performance and some entrepreneurial stuff today.
I agree. It's so crazy. You really do feel like you get to know people all these years of seeing each other's posts, like seeing someone else's posts, and you kind of get at how they think. You get to see their personality. You do feel like you get to know them. So I'm pumped, dude. I after all these years, it's crazy to me that we've never actually met in person. My wife's always like, they're your Instagram friends. They're not your real friends. So I'm like, no, I feel like I really know all these people. So
It,
yeah, man, I'm so pumped to have you on here. Get to like actually just have a real conversation. And just, you do so many interesting things. I was telling you before we got on, yeah, you're a physical therapist, trainer, strength and conditioning specialist. A lot of PTs kind of have some of those accolades, but you've done so many interesting things. Your journey is so atypical in terms of the education, the products you've invented. Like, you've done so many interesting things. And I think this podcast, part of it is putting out educational content that serves people who have pain and injuries. But another side of it is helping practitioners. And I think helping them in their clinical thinking, but also helping them from a business and entrepreneurship standpoint. And I think so many practitioners are in healthcare insurance-based models and are burnt out and often are looking for ways to be creative. They love the industry and what they're studying and educating patients on, but trying to find different ways that don't burn them out so much. And I think you've done you've done so many different things. I think this will be inspiring to a lot of the practitioners out there. So, man, thank you for coming on. Can I ask you, can you just give a little bit? It's also cool. You and I both have Taekwondo black belts and grew up in sport Taekwondo. And
I didn't know that, Tom.
that's, yeah.
I
I don't
didn't know
talk about it as much. You were at a
that.
higher level than I was. Yeah, but you were on the US national team.
I was on the US national team many moons ago, but it was like a Chinese kung fu movie. Back in the day, I worked at this athletic club called the Highline YMCA. It was a YMCA, which, by the way, is one of the greatest institutions on the face of the earth.
I'm a Y member.
You go to any Y anywhere, and you're like, this is the greatest club ever, and it costs nothing. So I'm at the Y. I'm working at the Y. I'm a manager. I'm a maintenance guy at the Y, and I'm mopping these courts, the racquetball courts, because you got to mop them to get the dust off, so everybody gets that squeak when they cut and pivot. And so I'm mopping the cleanest court of all at Highline Athletic Club was court number 7, because court number 7 was across from court number 8, and court number 8 was where the Taekwondo team practiced. And so I would mop this court and just watch them in awe. I always loved Bruce Lee. I had certain icons, Bruce Lee, Michael Jordan was another one, but man, I was a Bruce Lee guy. And one day the instructor he kind of barged over. He almost looked pissed off. He opened my door and he said, put the mop down and come train with us.
That's awesome.
And I was like 20 years old. I mean, I wasn't into I had never done martial arts. And so I put the mop down. I went and trained. I had a background in soccer, though. I was a competitive soccer player.
So you're a good kicker, like good power with your kicks.
My footwork, like my lower body, my lower extremity dexterity and agility and footwork was like pretty darn good. And of course, I was training 8 days a week.
Yeah,
I love training. And he started working with me. And the next thing you know, it was like 2 years, I was testing for a black belt, which is kind of unheard of. I was the fastest in the ITF. They said I was the fastest ever to progress from a white belt to a black belt. And then that very summer, my coach was like, there's nationals coming up. I think you have a chance of making a national team. Tom, I've been training for 2 years.
That's
I'm like,
pretty unbelievable.
Are you kidding me? I can't compete at the national level. I show up to nationals and I got a team spot. I was 2.5 years into it. And then 5 years later, I was the team captain on the US national team at the World Championships in St. Petersburg, Russia. So martial arts gave me so much. It taught me so much about not just sports performance. It spawned my personal training career, because I wanted to be the fastest, most explosive, most balanced, most accurate guy on the mat. So I really dove into how to train your body,
Mm-hmm.
kinesiology,
Totally.
biomechanics, exercise phys. I wanted to understand that. And I became a personal trainer because of it.
Hmm.
And then I competed so frequently and trained. I overtrained. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
be the first one to admit I was doing like plyometrics 4 times a week. Looking
Totally.
back at that, I'm like, maybe that's why I've had so many knee surgeries. But anyhow, um, I, but I was injured so frequently,
Mhm.
and I got experience with a physical therapist that knew so much about the body, and I was pretty sharp then with personal training, and they just blew me away.
Hmm.
I was like, oh my gosh, I did not know all the anatomical landmarks and palpation and manual resistive exercise, like all the stuff they were doing, and I said, that's it. I'm going to be a physical therapist. I
Hmm.
changed my major in college to from psychology to like exercise science,
Yeah.
kinesis, and then I went to graduate school and got my PT degree, and then so anyhow, martial
Yeah.
arts was a huge part of my journey, and of course the discipline and the
For
persistence and working through all the hardships. Those are great lessons about how to create a process and the way you do anything,
for sure.
and that leads to success.
Yeah, no, I think so many people talk about that the kind of, I remember at the end of our Taekwondo classes, we'd always recite kind of these, our instructor would lead it, and it was always discipline, patience, humility. And I think those things are so important in the rest of life, like you say, you learn so many lessons in martial arts, the discipline and patience and humility. I think those do help you maybe more likely that you're successful in other areas because you've kind of got that system in place. And but dude, that's crazy that you started at 20 and you must have been so gung-ho with your training. Like I would imagine to make the national team in 2 years and then be the captain. I mean, you must have been like super dedicated.
I really was, and a lot of people don't realize this when they see, nowadays with social media, you can see anything, and you
Mhm.
just see these people, regardless of whether it's an entrepreneur or an athlete or I was watching a pool shark. This guy is 9 years old, pool shark. He runs the table on a guy 3 times his age. Your jaw's on the ground. Like, who is this 9 year old? Like
Yeah.
9 years old.
Yeah.
But it's that process, and it's that once you fall in love with something, and if you're passionate about it, it's no longer kind of work. And I remember my buddies would, like, one time in particular, I was training for the US national team. This was right after my black belt testing.
Okay.
And so
So
I
like
should
2 years
have
in, like,
been my first on, first on.
yeah. Okay. Yep.
And so I should have been kind of relaxing and hanging out. My buddy shows up in a limo, right? It's his birthday. He's like, dude, it's on. It's Friday night, it's 7:30. We're going to a steakhouse on me. We're going out to the clubs. I'm in my 20s. We're going
Hmm.
clubbing. I got some girls
Yeah.
that want to meet you and yada yada. And I mean, trust me, there was a second where I was like, oh man. And I had national team training the next morning at 9 a.m. And I said, I love you, bro, but I'm out. And
Wow.
I
Yeah.
just closed the door, and I didn't give it a chance for conversation. I just slammed the door shut. And of course, I was crying in the corner, like in a fetal position, like, oh, this would have been so fun. But I woke up the next day, and we were doing wind sprints at 9 a.m. to start our workout, which I'm not sure that was the best sports performance progression, but that's what we did. Hey, we're
Yeah.
starting with wind sprints. Let's gas you out so you can't even function, your central nervous system. But man, I was in shape.
That is amazing. Yeah, I started Taekwondo when I was 12 because of being into Ninja Turtles. Like I was super into Ninja Turtles. That was kind of like the popular thing when I was in, I guess,
Wait,
like
wait, wait,
elementary
wait.
school.
Who's your favorite Ninja Turtle?
Raphael.
Okay, of course.
I was a big Raphael. What about you? Who's
Yeah,
your?
Raphael, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, he's. I love that. Yeah, I love those movies, and that's really what got me into martial arts. But I was so serious about sport taekwondo because it became an Olympic sport the year I graduated from high school in 2000. So I thought about just not going to college. I wasn't super into high school. I just was super dedicated to taekwondo, and I thought about maybe I'll just try and train for the Olympics. And some of the guys I grew up in Montana, and some of my buddies were on the like we
You
were
were
all kind of
good.
at we were like in this group that was competing at a pretty high level in Montana in sport taekwondo. And but I ended up going to college, found exercise science. I think I was probably kind of like you. I didn't appreciate it when I was younger, but I think being in martial arts, you learn so much about your body. You're barefoot, you're learning movement control, and you're kind of inadvertently learning kinesiology. And at that time I was really into like reading Muscle and Fitness and like Men's Health. Like I'd read the magazines like before there was internet, right? I was just reading the magazines at the grocery store, and then when I found exercise science and kines, I just loved it. Like I was so obsessed with that information and like exercise physiology and the way you could change your body through training. And when you went into that, so you were psychology and then you changed over to kines exercise science after working with those physical therapists. Did you go straight from undergrad to PT school?
It was no, it was kind of a mess. So
Uh-huh.
I was actually I wasn't the greatest student. So it's truth, full transparency here. So I was on my fifth year of undergraduate in psychology,
Uh-huh.
and then I had this experience with a physical therapist, and it came to me like a flash of light. I'm like, and I called my mom. I was like, Mom, who is a psychotherapist. Both my parents were psychologists, so I kind of
Uh-huh.
thought, oh, I guess that's in the genealogy. That's what I'll do. I called my mom. I said, "Don't be mad. I'm fell in love. I know what I want to do." And she was elated. She's like, "Son, psychology is not for everybody. You have to be into it." And and so I knew from that moment. But the challenge was, I looked at the curriculum, and there was a lot of when you're a psychology major, you're not taking anatomy,
Oh yeah.
phys, kines, organic. You're not taking any of that. You're
Mm.
taking like philosophy and
Yeah.
Socratic method and all this stuff. And so I ended up doing another basically year and a half, 2 years of undergrad. So now I'm 6, 7 years
Yeah.
deep.
Just to get your prereqs. You need all those prereqs.
And then I had to apply for a Master's of Science program. Back then, there wasn't doctoral programs.
Yeah.
They were
Yes.
very on the fringe. Now all the programs are doctoral, and that's
Mm-hmm.
great. But so anyhow, then I got into. I think they looked at my resume because again, I didn't have great graduate record exams. But
Yeah.
they looked at my persistence and my dedication. Like, man, this dude's been in school for 7 years. He clearly wants
Mm-hmm.
to get into this program, and they gave me an interview. Man, once I get an interview, there's no denying this dude.
You're taking it down. I never really score well. I always talk with there's a buddy of mine from growing up. He's an architect now. We always talk about those standardized exams like the GRE. I always kind of score average on those, but I get really high grades in when I'm in a science course or something I'm interested in, like exercise science. I get great grades and do well in those things, but those kind of standard, I never felt like those exams were actually a great indicator. I know they need something, but yeah, I don't think the interviews are better. Like the interview, like seeing what courses a person took, just getting to know them, their background. Like a lot of PTs have a sports background and had physical therapy. I had physical therapy in my knee in high school, and I think a lot of people come from that.
Well, it's interesting. So we had a gal in our graduate program. There's only 62 people, and there was a few hundred applicants. So when I got an interview, I'm like, man, I am not leaving without. I'm like, literally, I'm not leaving this room until you accept me into this program. And they're like, okay.
You said that in your interview.
No
Something along those lines.
terms, yeah.
Yeah.
But I also had a tremendous amount of volunteer work at Craig Hospital. Now, folks that don't know Craig Hospital, that's one of the top brain and spinal cord injury hospitals in the world. Christopher Reeves, the first Superman, went to Craig Hospital.
Yeah.
And it just so happened one of my interviewers was worked at Craig Hospital for like 10 years. And I'm like, oh, it's
Yes.
just slam dunk. But yeah, I just they looked at my resume and looked at my passion, and also I think they did look at my martial arts. And something that was interesting is, so I went to school with this one gal. She scored a perfect score on our GREs. That's like Mark Zuckerberg's type stuff. It doesn't happen. This gal was literally off the charts genius. We get to the first day of anatomy lab, cadaver dissection. She's vomiting in the hallway. She dropped out of school. She couldn't do the labs. She wasn't good communicatively. She wasn't. She just did. So it's interesting. The again, graduate record exam, that's fine. It's a baseline, but it's not indicative of who you're going to be as a physical therapist.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, a lot of people that were in our graduate program, they were short on therapeutic exercise, which is something that I did, again, 8 days a week. I had all the injuries. I already rehabilitated myself from all the injuries. I understood exercise science and biomechanics and kinesiology. And, by the way, your book is phenomenal.
Thanks, man.
This is a book that, I had Kisner and Colby. I don't know if anybody listening that's old school, there's a book for a therapeutic exercise called
Yes,
and Cold.
totally.
It kind of has some baseline stuff, and it was good. It
Yeah.
was a good basic book. And you came out with Rehab Science, and it's like this is what programs need. So hopefully, you're in all the
Oh,
doctoral programs around the country.
thanks, man. I appreciate you saying that. You've been so nice with doing like nice reviews for me on Amazon, all that. That was really the goal of it, was to like create this really evidence-based therapeutic exercise resource because, like you, I think that again, one of the things you kind of maybe can take for granted growing up as an athlete is you learn about a lot about exercise and therapeutic exercise. You learn a lot about movement control and just body awareness and mobility and resistance training. And I think, we had a lot of people, same kind of story in my PT program, who came in who had no real movement or athletic background. So it was a real struggle for them. And often, may have scored really well on a standardized exam like the GRE, but didn't have the social IQ. And so they'd get in there and just struggled to kind of communicate. You could tell like building rapport with patients on internships, stuff like that was going to be a challenge for them. And I think you have to consider all those factors. Like the longer I'm in physical therapy, I'm sure you run into this. Like when you're interacting with people with pain and injuries, you have two parents in this field. Like it's such a psychological kind of talk therapy when you're working with people who are down and depressed, they're injured, they have pain. My mom's a psychiatric nurse practitioner. My dad was a social worker. So I came from a very
You get it.
psychosocial household as well. So that you can't understate how the importance of just that, like the social, the communication side of us, whether we're in fitness, training, physical therapy, any kind of healthcare, any kind of healthcare practitioner. That's so important.
Well, wait, who was the pain management science guy you had on last week?
That's Greg Lehman.
Yeah, so Lehman, that guy was brilliant. And one thing he said, I actually made a comment. Healing starts, the pain control and mitigation, it starts the second the patient comes into your door.
Mm-hmm.
So even, I mean, not to be like trite, but even your front desk, your administrators, the whole vibe of your clinic, the healing starts the second that person walks in the
For
door.
sure.
The initial evaluation, you can be cold and clinical and aloof, like, hey, I'm going to heal you. Or you can, be engaging and
Mm-hmm.
gosh, you got a shoulder. Yeah, I've had one of those, man. That's rough. But you know what? I've had a lot of shoulders and this is something I'm really good at. We love working on shoulders here and we've got a process for you and we're going to help you. And the next thing you know, they kind of like, they feel better. If you
Totally.
had a pain scale rating, you talk to somebody for 5 minutes. And if you build that instant rapport, they went from a 7 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10. You didn't put one hand on them. You
No,
didn't
I,
intervene with one modality. Like
yep.
that is extremely powerful, but not
Yes.
everybody has that.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with you. Do you think that I always think this kind of side is interesting because some part of me thinks this is just who people are and they're kind of wired to be empathetic. And I'm sure, you can learn some of it, but do you feel like your parents being in the fields they were in, did you learn a lot of this by just like the environment of being raised by them?
I did. I think the early exposure. So I grew up. My mom went to Smith College. My dad taught at Amherst. I was on Amherst campus. People that don't know Amherst, but there's left. And these guys were like. I mean, there was a co-ed naked sauna in the 70s when I was at Amherst camp. Now, I went in there with swim trunks on, but literally everybody's just naked in the sauna. It was unbelievable. But the point is, my dad's best friend. His name was Ezra. He was from Africa, like Ghana. I mean, the guy, his voice, and he wore kind of like the ceremonial African, wardrobe. And I was just exposed to different types of people
Mm-hmm.
with very different viewpoints and the way they looked and acted and behaved. And they were all very smart.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of told me that, hey, early on, we all have a unique presence in this world. I mean, think about how many people have come and gone. Like we are here, we're here now. You have a unique presence, a unique thumbprint, and it's beholden on you to go out and help others around you actualize their human potential. I think that's the meaning of life is to elevate others and help others actualize their human potential. And if you're not healthy, if you're not fit, if you're in pain, guess what? You're not doing any of that. You're in a stuck pattern. And so everything I do on a daily basis is to try to help people get healthy, help people mitigate pain, get out of pain, help people to start moving, and help people to feel strong. When you're strong and healthy and fit, you oscillate at a different energy, man. And and very few people, you look at them. You go to the mall in Minneapolis or wherever, and it's like, man, this is rough.
Oh yeah.
So, so
I
that's what I know you're the same way, Tom.
Oh, dude, same. I just love. I I have a hard time interrupting because you're just you just radiate this like inspiring, empowering, positive energy, and it's amazing. I have known this about you for a long time. It's very obvious. Any video you watch or any clip of you teaching somewhere, and it's amazing because it's like authentic and it's who you really are. And I think people, I just love. I gravitate, and again, like I don't know if it's just how I'm wired, what, but kind of gravitate towards like glass half full, like positive, and just the same as you. Like I really care about helping build people up, whether that's through education or just empowering them or being an empathetic, listening and just hearing where they're at. And it's always been what's sort of driven me in anything I do. And I'm curious, when you finished your physical therapy program, did you go into regular kind of physical therapy practice initially?
Yeah, I did.
How
I
long
mean,
was that for?
so it was very interesting. So out of graduate school, I got a interview at Health South.
Okay.
Now Health South is a big organization, and that's like a nothing burger. However, this Health South was in Birmingham, Alabama,
Hmm.
and in Birmingham, Alabama, there's a guy named Dr. Kevin Wilk.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and Dr. Wilk worked side by side with Dr. Andrews, who was, I think he's retired now, but he was the foremost shoulder surgeon on the face of the earth. If you were a baseball player, if you were an NFL quarterback, if you had a shoulder pathology at the highest level, you go to Dr. Andrews, you get rehab by Dr. Kevin Wilk. And he had a biomechanics lab. And so I go to this interview in Birmingham, and I'm so fired up. I bought like a black briefcase. I wanted to look all professional. And I show up and I interviewed, and they're like, we love you. We want to hire you. The only thing is our protocol is that you have to spend 9 months of acute care
Hmm.
in our hospital. That's what you have to do to kind of earn your stripes. And so I said, oh, can we visit the acute care ward? Now, keep in mind, this is in Alabama.
Hmm.
So pretty much everybody's kind of out of shape.
Yeah.
They're overweight. They smoke. They haven't taken care of themselves. And of course, I want to impact those people. But man, so on one side of me, I got all these people. I'm basically cleaning bedpans and helping them transfer from their
Yeah.
bed to the wheelchair. On the other side is this biomechanics lab with Kevin Wilk. And I'm like, oh my God, this sucks. But I turned that job down, and I ended up getting hired at the Aspen Sports Medicine Institute, which was an outpatient orthopedic facility. And I
Yeah.
was in love. And we
Yeah.
worked with Olympic athletes, and Lance Armstrong was in and out of there, and Martina Navratilova, and just it was like unbelievable. The problem was, if you've ever traveled to Aspen, the
Uh-huh.
cost of living there is exorbitant.
I was just there in
It's like
August.
a wrong
It's
word than that, Tom. I don't
yeah.
know. Extraordinary, like stratospheric.
Hmm.
And so I get there, I get my first check, I look at my rent statement, and I said, this is not working. Like, I
Hmm.
don't know what to do. And that was the first time I kind of had this spark of like, I got to do something else. I've got to
Hmm.
supplement my income and have a side hustle. And so I said, you know what? What are my skills? I looked at myself. I said, wait a minute. I've got a medal, a podium at the world level in Taekwondo. Maybe I can teach a kickboxing class. So I start this. I made a little flyer and I said, "Hey, US National TaeKwonDo champion." I had an action picture on there. I started this kickboxing class, and I show up the first day, and I'm like, I'll charge you like I don't know, $8 a pop. Big deal. 5 or 6 people show up. I'm making some cash. 25 people showed up at
Wow. The
eight
first day.
bucks a pop. And I'm like, I just made more than I made in my entire day doing
Yeah.
physical therapy, something I have a graduate degree in.
Hmm.
And that was the first time I realized you can still do things you love, but
Hmm.
actually make money. And you have to think outside the box if you're
Hmm.
a professional.
Yeah. So that job in Aspen was your first job out of PT school.
Yeah, I mean, I was thrown. And by the way, I don't know if you like you do your clinical affiliations.
Yeah.
I actually had a clinical affiliation in Aspen, and
Oh, you
that's
did.
how they got to know me and they hired me. So you've got your instructor, and you hover over him, right? You,
Yeah.
you shadow him, you mirror him or her. And I did that for 2 days, and then he got sick. He
Oh.
says, Pete, you got to take my whole caseload. I've got the flu. So I'm 3 days in, Tom, to this
Yeah.
affiliation, and there's like fresh ACLs, there's ankle sprains, there's rotated people in the shoulder, harness because they've ruptured their biceps.
Yeah.
Like it went on and on, and I said, Chris, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, yeah, you do. Believe in yourself. You got this. And so 3 days in, I was seeing a full caseload. And so it was
Wow.
kind of trial by fire. But again, it goes back into that. I understood therapeutic exercise and I had that empathetic. I've had shoulder dislocations and subluxations. I've had AC separations.
Mm-hmm.
I've torn my abdominal wall. I've had a high hamstring tear. I've had an ACL. Like I knew how these people were feeling. So everything was very slow. When I did my manipulations, it was very slow. And I would speed up as they felt comfortable. I watched their eyes, I watched their facial expressions. I kind of had an intuitive way to gauge them. And the next thing, and I kind of screwed myself because I was like, I want to learn from this guy.
Uh-huh.
And then he's like, well, you clearly can handle a caseload. So now I'm going to double book myself and you're going to take one patient and I'll take the other. And it was, man, that was a tough internship, but I learned a lot in 6 weeks.
Oh, I'm sure. Like it is kind of a bummer not to get that mentorship from that person, but you also get all the learning of like just kind of being thrown to the wolves and having to just figure it out. Like, you could probably make the argument that that's maybe the best learning situation, like where you're just having to really problem solve and figure it out. Like that's pretty intense.
It was good. And in fairness of this clinic, it was kind of an open clinic. So you had your little office, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of times maybe you'd start doing an eval in your office, but mainly we love to be in this kind of central area where
Yeah.
there was plinths and there's tables and there was therapeutic exercise modalities everywhere. And so you'd be, mobilizing a shoulder right next to another therapist and you're listening to them talk. You're listening to other problems and pathologies and dysfunctions. And every once in a while, a therapist that was senior to me would say, hey, have you ever tried this for that patella mob? Try this, inferior, superior tilt or whatever it was, because they're having some problems with their patella tendon. And I'm like, oh, I never thought about it. And so I did learn a lot, and there was a lot of collaborative stuff going on in that clinic. And man, and then that coupled with the sports performance, because again, these therapists, we had access to the Aspen Club, which was a 5-star sports performance facility. I mean, we didn't have turf back then, but we had access to everything. Kaiser pneumatic machine. I mean, it was a full on place. And so therapists would start, a week or two of acute, subacute stuff, and then boom, we're right out in the sports performance floor. And now you're watching high level strength coaches work with Martina Navratilova after a shoulder pathology, and it was like, man, this is awesome. I was in my sweet spot, and I'm forever, indebted to the Aspen Club and Bill Fabertini and Chris Petchik and BJ Williams and all the people that I work side by side with.
That's such a cool, it's kind of crazy small world. My wife's parents lived in Aspen back in the 70s for a bunch of years. So we usually go every summer just for a vacation. I was just there in August. And like you were saying, it's gotten so expensive, but it's such a neat community in terms of how active everyone is. And everybody's out hiking. And, in the winter, there's all the winter sports and people are running and biking. And did you guys at that clinic, did you see any of the Stedman Hawkins patients? Or did they go somewhere else? Were you too far away?
We saw every one of them.
You did. You saw all Stedman Hawkins. Yeah.
We got referred every single patient in that valley from Vail. Some people drove from Vail, which is, I don't know, an hour and a half to get to Aspen. No, 2 hours to get that. They would drive from Vail to come do therapy. Now, granted, they had disposable income and they'd stay overnight or whatever. But
yeah.
We were really a premier sports performance center there. And we had right next door, we had the Carmichael Training Systems, which Chris Carmichael trained Lance Armstrong. Oh. He was like his exercise phys and strength coach. And so so Lance Armstrong would be in and out of there, and the U.S. Postal team would be there, and you're just like, what is happening? Michael Jordan would walk by, Reggie Jackson walks by. It was just crazy.
And talk about like a great training environment, because what I think Aspen just in town is 9,000 feet. So you've got altitude training. It's like,
oh yeah.
And just there was so much high level still, I think, a lot of high level just sports type training there. Like it just, you find these unique pockets throughout the country. But wait, now where did you grow up? On the East Coast?
No, well, yes. I
Okay.
spent my first 7 years kind of in New England area. I was born in Minnesota, but I was adopted, so I kind of moved around a lot early on. And then I ended up in New England. And then at 7, my parents got a divorce, and I
Uh-huh.
moved with my mom to Denver. My mom and my sister to Denver, and then I've kind of been a Colorado
Colorado.
native. Whatever. I want to be a native, but I'm not
Yeah.
a native. But I've
Yeah.
been here since I was 7.
Okay.
And then, had a couple of businesses. I moved to San Francisco at one point because I
Hmm.
worked for TRX, and I moved to California, or I'm
Hmm.
sorry, to Florida at one point because I was doing some stuff with a private client, but
Yeah.
pretty much in Aspen and Denver for my whole life.
Yeah. So, okay, so that because I was wondering how the Colorado, like how you ended up there. But like, so you have this first job, so that physical therapy job, but then you teach this kind of kickboxing class with that background. So maybe the entrepreneurship wheels kind of get spinning a little bit. What happens? Can you kind of take us through a little journey? Like, how long did you stay in a traditional physical therapy setting? Like, you've done so many interesting things. What kind of happened from that point forward?
I actually, I was out of the setting pretty fast because
Hmm.
what I realized, and I don't want to, I say this uh, I say this kind of gently, but physical therapy is challenging business to be in. I mean, a lot of times you're dealing with insurance reimbursement, right? You're dealing with, or most people don't have a cash pay system, so you're dealing with insurance, you're dealing with doctors, you're dealing with soap notes that
Hmm.
can sometimes, depending on how many clients you see or patients, it can take you an hour, 2 hours after your normal day of work. It's just was really tough. What I noticed is I would train somebody, their physical therapy would run out. Let's say it's
Hmm.
an ACL,
Yeah.
so they come in for 2, 3 months. Well, as you know, an ACL, if you're trying to get back to mogul skiing or
Yeah.
whatever it is, playing tennis, you ain't ready at 3 months.
Mm-mm.
And so they said, Pete, I love working with you. Like, you know so much about this knee rehab. How do we keep doing? I said, well, maybe I could personal train you or something on the
Hmm.
side. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm making 3 times as much training this client on the side. I don't have to do a soap note. I don't have to call doctors and clinics and administrator. I just get to do what I love and make more money. And so I started almost shying away from physical therapy. Now, keep in mind, like you said, everybody in Aspen is very active. So they're
Hmm.
constantly dealing with the shoulder or a back or a knee or a hip or whatever. So I kind of had the best of both worlds.
Hmm.
So after about a year or two of practice, I went to part-time physical therapy and part-time personal training. And I was also doing kickboxing lessons
Hmm.
and doing classes with that. And then I had a really unique opportunity to work with a private client, which kind of changed my life. And because he became a mentor of mine. So at one point, I worked with a woman who had dislocated her shoulder. She had this terrible brachial plexus injury, and I was only a year out of grad school. And she comes to me, I mean, like literally with a dead arm.
Hmm.
And I said, I'm looking in my textbooks. I'm like, there's not much on brachial plexus
Yeah.
dislocations where the arm is neurologically dead.
Hmm.
And so I'm clearing her cervical spine. I'm like, no, this is coming from the shoulder. And I didn't know what to do with this lady. At one point, I was big on the upper body ergometers. I don't
Yeah.
know if any practitioners listening out there, if you have a shoulder issue or something, and you're not doing some kind of upper body, it's like bicycling. If you got a
Hmm.
knee injury,
Hmm.
what do? You get on the bike. Well,
Sure.
this is an upper body bike. I
Yep.
still use it to this day for my
Hmm.
shoulder. So I'm like, I got to get this lady on the upper body bike, but she can't hold on. She has no strength. So I'm a year out of school. I don't know what to do. I taped her hand to the freaking handle.
Yeah.
I taped her right hand to the handle. And so now, but she kind of started getting this like reciprocal,
Hmm.
she got scapular protraction, scapular retraction. She started to get some movement, some joint play in there. She started to almost reciprocally,
Hmm.
start to activate some of the muscles. And I'm not kidding. After about 3 sessions, and everybody in the clinic was looking at me like, I don't know, dude. I mean, I'm not sure that's it protocol, and they kind of gave me the stink eye. After 3 sessions, I didn't have to tape her hand. She was
Wow.
holding on to this. And
Hmm.
we'd struggled for a couple months on what to do. And so, but anyhow, the point is, this lady, she gets married to a very prominent man.
Uh-huh.
The guy falls down the stairs right after their wedding, tears his quad tendon. Guess who she calls? She's in Palm Beach, Florida. She calls me and says, Pete, I need your help. I'm in love with this guy. We got married. You're the only guy I'm going to hire. Get down here now. So it was during the off season in Aspen. Aspen's very cyclical, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
During the winters, it's busy. During the summers, it's busy. But there's like these little hedge seasons in the
Yep.
spring and the fall. So it's the spring. So I go down to Palm Beach and I start working with this guy. The guy's a billionaire, right? He owns a clothing manufacturer called Jones Apparel of New York. I could say his name because he doesn't care. His name's Sidney Kimmel, and he's just one of the most outstanding human beings I've ever met in my life. And so I start to get friendly with Sidney Kimmel, and he starts to get friendly with me. And I introduce him. Of course, we're working on his knee, but I'm doing upper body stuff with him. I'm like, come on, we got to work on your core. Let's go. You're getting out of shape here. And the next thing you know, he's like, Pete, I don't want you to leave. And I said, Sidney, my whole career's back in Aspen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, and he made me an offer I couldn't refuse.
That's amazing.
As it goes. So the next thing I know, I'm traveling to New York and Florida and California and Las Vegas and to Paris and like all these crazy in a Gulfstream airplane. Tom.
Oh my gosh.
Like I'm 29 years old. I'm flying around in a G5. It was ridiculous.
That's crazy.
But what was great about him is that he came from nothing. He was selling clothing out of a suitcase door to door.
Mm-hmm.
And his dad came through the Great Depression and they had nothing. And he taught me about resilience and grit and out of the box thinking and determination and how to just like manifest something into reality as a businessman, as an entrepreneur. And that really stimulated my entrepreneurial career after that.
Yeah. How long did you stay with him?
I stayed with him for 6 years.
Wow.
And then I had gotten married. My wife and my wife really wanted to have a child. I wanted a child, definitely. I just wanted to wait a little bit longer. But, you know, when the missus comes on, you don't mess around,
That's
man.
right. It's true.
Okay, yes, ma'am. So we had a child. And then once we had a child, it was very difficult to travel. And it just logistically, we kind of all decided, like, it's time to move on.
Yeah.
And so I moved back to Aspen with my kid now. And it's like the greatest kid I've ever could imagine.
Yeah.
But then I kind of got back into practice, and it was then when I developed my first product.
Okay, so it was when you got done. So you did those 6 years traveling with him, helping with his training, physical therapy, anything he needed. Then that ends. You have a kid. You come back to Aspen, get back into clinical practice, kind of what you were doing before. But then you invent. Is that what was the name of it before TRX bought it? Was that your first product?
No, my first product was actually called the Functional Training Rack.
Oh yes, I think maybe. Yeah. What was it? What did it do?
It's actually really cool. So I was in our clinic. I could come back to the clinic, and I'm like, this is the messiest clinic. You ever been in like a sports performance clinic where, you know, you look on the floor and there's a Bosu ball, there's wobble boards, there's cords strewn all over, there's foam rollers, there's like, it just looks like a tornado went through there.
Yeah, chaos.
Which is, you know, part of it's kind of cool because it's organic and everybody's training, but part of it's annoying. You can't find anything. It looks terrible. There's no floor space because everything's strewn around. So I said, there's got to be a way to organize this. I created what's called the Functional Training Rack, and it was like a medicine ball rack on steroids. It was slanted, so behind the medicine ball rack, you could have a tilt board and some wobble boards. On the side, there was little antennas that came out. They were steel, and they had J-hooks on them. So each J-hook, you could hang a sport cord. So now you got all your sport cords lined up, light, medium, heavy, extra heavy. And then on the side, there was little canisters where you could put a yoga mat or a foam roller. I even created a little lateral hoop that would hold a stability ball. Because back then, they didn't, you know, I'm not saying I invented that stability ball hoop holder.
Yes,
you
see everywhere. Yeah.
But I'm pretty confident that I invented that.
Yeah, well, that's
because
crazy.
Before 2008, I'd never seen that before. And I said, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so Functional Training Rack, I launched it. I went to a trade show. I sold all my product. I was rolling. And then 2009 hit. For those that aren't old enough to remember 2009, it was the worst year of my life. I lost my house. I mean, I lost everything. The real estate market crashed.
Mm-hmm.
Oil prices shot up. Gas prices shot up. My cost of goods on this product tripled overnight, Tom. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it was insane. And I also had some other issues like kitting and fulfillment that I didn't
Mm-hmm.
really understand back then because it was my
Yeah.
first product. So I kind of gave all my merchandise to Perform Better, which is a nice
Yep.
sports performance kind of catalog magazine distributor. And I walked away with my tail between my legs. However, I had some valuable lessons in how
Totally.
to launch a product,
Yeah, for
how
sure.
to design a product,
Mm-hmm.
how to build a website, how to sales and market, how to do trade shows, and what not to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you learn so many lessons in the, I hate to even call them failures because I've had a lot of these too, but they're just learning lessons. Like I've had businesses that failed and I learned different things. Like I had a business at one point that I thought if I built it, people would just come, and I realized, you have to actually market things. So, but like that's so interesting. How would you think? Okay, so because I think a lot of people are like, oh, I could see where you could invent a product. I see a problem here, but how did you actually figure that whole process out?
Man, part of it was just kind of ignorance, not in by design, but just kind of like I didn't realize how hard it was. I just thought, oh, I'll just take my concept that was on a napkin. I drew it on a
Mm-hmm.
napkin,
Mm-hmm.
but I knew it would work because I played around with some things and said, this is going to work. I know this is going to work. So I took my drawing to a fabricator in Carbondale. Now, Carbondale is like a little sister area
Yeah.
or a cheaper rent division of Aspen. And there was a bunch of steel workers down there, and I found a guy, and I said, "Hey, could you help me build this?" It was kind of funny because typical steel workers are not like huge exercise guys.
Yeah.
They got a big pot belly and they got tattoos
Totally.
everywhere and whatever. And so this guy was a trip. He's like, "You want to do what?" Okay, man, I got you. And so we're building this rack, and he took it like he took pride in this thing. I
Hmm.
mean, the first one I built, it probably cost me $300 to make, and I was going to sell it for $290. Like it didn't
Mm-hmm.
really work.
Yeah.
The point was, man, it was so beautiful, and I brought it into my clinic, and I put all the stuff on. It was powder coated,
Mm-hmm.
and
Really
I
nice.
brought it into my clinic. I put all the stuff on there, and every practitioner and every ATC and every aide there was blown away. They said, "Pete, this is a business. You've got to make more of these."
Hmm.
So I started. That's when I kind of started to create this business.
Hmm.
Um,
Did you use that same guy? Did you keep using him to make the next ones? I
I
mean,
no, what I realized is I can't afford him because he
uh
was doing steel work for like houses in Aspen,
got
and
it.
they would want a special custom railing built. And he
Totally.
was, these guys in Aspen, they're like $50 an hour, $60 an hour to
Yeah.
just bend and cut steel, which is pretty expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go down to Denver, Colorado, and I found a guy that could make them and at a cheaper price point. And you just don't know what you don't know. I mean,
sure.
one of the funny stories is there's something called kitting. Kitting means you've got a product that's done. Well, you have to put it into some kind of a box. Now,
Ah.
if you've ever bought an Apple iPhone, right? You get this box, and the box is so beautiful. You
Mm-hmm.
open up the box, and everything's perfectly laid out, and it's like an experience like you've never. And you're like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to throw the box away because
Totally.
it's so high end. Well, this was not that.
Yeah.
A cardboard box with a bunch of foam shoved in there, and it took me like 10 units before I kind of figured out a system of how to cut the foam and how to pack it in there. If you don't pack it right, the box gets damaged in delivery, and then your rack is bent, and then they say, I want a return. Well, guess what? Now you have to pay for return shipping. You have to fix the unit or send them a new one. I mean, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
So all that, this is
All these things you learned along the way.
the kind of stuff you learn. And
Yeah.
what you said was very profound, is that you don't advance in life in anything without some kind of
Yeah.
learning, some kind of failure. And
Yeah.
it's like one of God's universal paradoxes. You have this all the time. It's about fall. It's coming up on fall here. So I have all these beautiful trees in my yard. I love my yard. It's I'm a corner lot. I got all these thick, beautiful trees. And then the leaves fall. And you're like, man, this sucks. I'm raking leaves for like days on end.
Yeah.
And then I look over at my neighbor who has no trees. And it's kind of like, well, wait a minute. They don't have any shade in the summer. They don't have this aesthetic, beautiful backdrop of the trees. So again, that's a universal paradox. The point is, you can't have success without failure.
Totally.
And boy, did I fail on that first one.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to learn those. And I would imagine a rack is such a big piece that, geez, the kitting process, like the shipping, like that had to be a whole undertaking. I mean, so you learn all these lessons. So you go through that, you have your first product. Did you get patents on it and everything?
I didn't. And I didn't, by the way,
Just
I'm
made it.
telling you, before, so the only stability ball holder at the time was, and they still have them, it was a little disc. So
Uh-huh.
imagine like a disc that raises the ball off the floor,
Yes, I remember those.
next together. And so you put the stability ball on this kind of like circular disc, and
Yep.
then you could actually put another disc on top of that stability
That's
ball,
right.
and then
Hmm.
put another ball on top of that disc. So you could stack them up theoretically, which is what we had in our clinic. Well,
Hmm.
invariably, I would need the ball on the bottom of the
Yeah.
stack.
Yep.
So it's like, this is the
Yeah.
stupidest. So I'd have to take the top ball off, which would roll all over the floor. Then I'd take the second ball off. And then I'd take the third ball. And then I have to redo this every time so that it
Hmm.
looks kind of, like cylindrical.
Yep.
And so I created this little hoop that came off the side of the rack with a little kind of swing arm,
Yep.
and the stability ball went right on that hoop. And had I patented to that, like every
Hmm.
design out there, you go to Life Fitness or Matrix or any kind of company that makes a rack, they have these
They have
hoops
that.
that hold the stability balls now. So
Totally.
I didn't know anything about patents, and
Yeah.
I,
I'm
I,
just curious, like,
yeah,
this is all part of the learning process, like you were talking about, because I would have been really shocked actually if your first product you knew all that stuff
I know.
because I wouldn't have known all that. And that little hoop that holds the ball, it's funny, the last one I just saw was at a hotel gym in Aspen, at the Aspen Meadows. I was at the Meadows and they had a one of those hoop kind of metal things.
I trained at that gym, the Aspen Meadows.
Hmm.
That's a beautiful pool out there,
It
right?
has a nice pool. It's a great spot, and you have
It's
a
a
lot of
great
night
spot.
like nature. It's a
Oh,
cool spot.
it's
Um,
yeah.
So you go from that, you have all these learning. So what? So you're back. You're kind of seeing patients. You're doing some training. You're doing some of your like kickboxing classes. You invent that product, and then what do you invent next?
Yeah, so then I kind of, once you do something and once somebody buys a product and sees value in what you're doing, I mean, it's like pulling that slot machine. You could do it 100 times, but that 101 time and you actually hit triple sevens, it's the most,
I'm sure it's addictive.
exhilarating feeling. It's like,
Yeah.
and that's why, it's a variable ratio of return. This is old Pavlovian conditioning stuff. Man, you don't pay somebody out every other time or every third time. You pay them out randomly
Hmm.
and they are hooked for life. So that's what the universe did to me. They paid me out randomly, and now I'm like stuck. I'm like, oh, what's my next problem I got to solve? So I'm training an X Games athlete named Mike Schultz, and he was a snowcross athlete. These guys that on their snowmobiles,
Yeah.
they do 90-foot gap jumps. They're insane. And he comes in from Minnesota. He says, I want to train with you, Pete. I heard you're the best strength coach in Aspen. I start training him, and he's got a weak core and he's got some low back pain, which imagine that.
Hmm.
So I'm doing Copenhagen side planks, and I'm doing power off presses, and I'm doing chops and lift patterns and perturbation. I'm doing everything. But I just felt like, man, I'm missing something. There's something I'm missing. And I look up in my closet and I see a closet rod. And for some reason, it just looked like a snowmobile handle.
Yeah.
I'm training this guy. I'm thinking snowmobile training all day long. And I said, that looks like a snowmobile handle. So I rip all my clothes off of there, grab this dowel rod out of my closet, and I screwed an eye bolt into one end,
Hmm.
attached a resistance cord. So now it's loaded asymmetrically. And
Hmm.
I attached that resistance cord to a ski rack in my garage.
Yeah.
And I started I put tension through the system
Yep.
and started steering it like I was on a snowmobile.
Yeah.
And because of the asymmetrical load, like every muscle, Tom, on a diagonal
Hmm.
spiral line from fingertip to toes was lit up. And then I faced a different direction. And then I switched hands. And then because of my martial arts background, I was like, I got bored with that. I'm like, forget snowmobiles. Let's talk about
Yeah.
martial arts. So now
Yeah.
I'm pushing and pulling, and I kind of had that serape effect,
Yeah.
that reciprocal push pull, which all overhead athletes go through and all
Hmm.
striking, martial artists go through. And now I'm working with speed and power and then balance. And I'm like, this is kind of badass.
Hmm.
So I take it to Mike. I trained with Mike for 2 weeks. He gets on the podium for the first time. And, obviously it's not because of my device I created, my asymmetrical bar training device, but it did help
Hmm.
get him out of back pain, and
Yeah.
it helped strengthen his core in 2 weeks.
Hmm.
You guys, it's one thing, people out there, if you're a new practitioner or if you're a sports performance coach or a trainer, you don't realize the impact you can have in a short period of time.
Sure.
And that's why these NFL athletes, they'll go to like a training camp or some practitioner that they love back in LA. They'll see them for 2 or 3 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
It just tunes them up. So now I'm training Mike. He gets on the podium, he leaves, and he says, "Hey, where do I buy one of these? Where do I get this?"
Uh-huh.
And again, a light bulb goes off, and I'm like, "Wow, you really liked it." And I said, "You know what? You can have this one. I'll make another one." And so I made 50 prototypes, 50 units. With by the way, the same fabricator down in Carbondale.
You did use the same guy again, the big guy.
Yeah. I'm like, I like this guy. He does.
But this is a lot smaller thing you're making this time around.
Yes, very astute, because now all of a sudden shipping, kitting, fulfillment becomes very different. And storage and warehousing and all that stuff. And plus, I really like the simplicity of this product. So it's a stick and a cord. I make 50 of them. I sell all of them to trainers and people. Everybody's using them in Aspen. It's kind of like this freak thing. Like, people would come from out of town. They're like, I've trained with people in Germany, Australia, Canada, Sao Paulo, Brazil. I come to Aspen. You guys are doing stuff that nobody else is doing. And this bar thing is one of them.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of getting cocky and all this. And I tried to go get money because one of my clients said, this should be a business. You got to raise some money. I didn't have money to launch a business. So I tried to get money, and this guy, one of the investors who was very astute, he actually was an original investor from Twitter. He said, "Why would I invest in a stick and a cord? I had this great presentation," and it was very deflating, but I kind of stuck with it. And I said, he just doesn't know the industry. And the next thing I got a team. We launched, it was called the Core 10 Trainer. Then it turned into the Rip Core FX. And we caught the eye of TRX, which at that time in 2000, let's call it 10-ish, TRX was the leader of functional training. They were blowing up. Drew Brees and all these NFL athletes were using the TRX suspension trainer. And it's a really well-run company, really great culture. These are the black and yellow straps, if you know what I'm talking about. They hang in almost every gym on the face of the earth. And so they contact us and say, this product is kind of cool. It might fit, it's the same price point. It's like fitness anywhere, anytime. It's functional. And so next thing you know, we were acquired by TRX. I moved to San Francisco. I'm launching TRX RIP training is what it was called. I launched that all over the world, and that was a great run. And by the way, this is the product that keeps on giving, Tom, because
do you get royalties from that or anything?
I got royalties from that.
Yeah.
Which, but then at some point your royalty period ends.
Got it.
And I had a big salary from the company, and they got some investment capital from a new group, and the new group was auditing them, and they said, "Who's this guy with the big salary?" They didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
Or they wouldn't have fired me. I mean, come on, you don't fire this guy. But anyhow, sure enough, I got fired. By the way, good lesson in humility. You never get too big for your britches, because you think you're indisposable. Guess what? You are not.
Yeah.
And so I got fired, and I was like, "Are you kidding? I've never been fired from a job in my entire life." And here I am on the biggest stage. I got fired. So a few years go by, and I find this company called Golf Forever. They actually found me. They wanted me to do some programming. Golf Forever is an app that helped golfers reduce back pain and get mobility and get some strength, so they had more distance on their drives. And I said, "This is really cool. It's just like a sports performance company, and with a rehab, background." And I started designing some content, and they said, "Hey, can we get the TRX RIP trainer as one of our tools, and we'll get an affiliate code, and we'll partner with TRX." And jokingly, I said, "We should make our own and get better."
Yeah.
And guess what we did? We made our own and made it better. It's now called the Golf Forever Swing Trainer. And now I'm getting royalties again on this same stupid product, the stick and the cord that I developed in my garage, 20 years ago.
That is amazing. It's so crazy, because I think now that you're talking about this, I think that I probably first learned about you back in those like 2009-10 range with the TRX RIP trainer, because I was teaching for Red Cord. So I was a Red Cord instructor.
Are you serious?
Yeah, with the Norwegians. And so because that was a suspension trainer from Norway, we had a lot of crossover with TRX exercises. So I knew I was in for 6 years I taught for them. I was in this like suspension training game kind of.
I didn't know that.
I think I I used to travel around with the Red Cord guys, and I think that I maybe saw. I just now that you're saying this, I think that's probably the first time I ever saw you, maybe presenting or maybe your face on something with the TRX Rip Trainer or something back then. So it's crazy. How long were you that period of time when? Okay, your product gets purchased by TRX. How long were you with TRX?
I was with them physically for 2.5 years in San
Uh-huh.
Francisco,
Okay.
and then for maybe another year, year and a half, um,
Yeah.
and then we kind of parted ways. And I was back to doing my own thing, and then I got then
The
Golf
Golf
Forever.
Forever. So for the new piece of equipment for Golf Forever, which I've seen, did you have to change it significantly to be different in
We
some? Yeah.
Well, not so much on the intellectual property because there was no patent on the swing trainer.
Oh,
I'm
there was.
sorry,
Oh,
no
on the.
trainer.
Got
But
it.
I changed. We changed everything. Like everything that pissed me off about the TRX Rip Trainer. Keep
Yeah.
in mind, I was with the company for 5 years. They never iterated the product once,
Oh.
and I think that was a big miss on
Yeah.
TRX's part. They iterated their suspension trainer every
Mm,
single year. It was new. It was better. It was beefier. It had better
totally.
trainers. It had innovations. The Rip Trainer they didn't do anything to,
Oh.
and it
Huh.
always frustrated me. And I felt kind of like the forgotten stepchild or
Yeah.
something. And so I said, man, I'm going to fix everything. So we made better handlebars. We made coaching zones in the handlebars.
Hmm.
We made it lighter. It was made of anodized aluminum. So
Hmm.
now there's no axial load. It's all transverse plane because it's really a rotational training device.
Yeah. Yeah.
We made the ball bearing. We put closed end ball bearings in, so it's buttery smooth. We added two cords, a light and a medium. So when you buy the product, you get two cords. And
Mm.
there's even like this interchangeable weighted ball that you can swing like a golf club. Golfers love to swing things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we put that, and then we have a carry bag, and it's just your bang for your buck. Like if you're not looking at the Golf Forever swing trainer, even if you're a strength coach, physical therapist, and you're working on with rotational athletes, which by the way, pickleball players,
Mm-hmm.
anybody that does anything is
Oh,
pretty much a rotational athlete.
yeah.
You
Exactly.
should be checking out the Golf Forever swing trainer.
Hmm.
On top of that, we are endorsed by Scotty Scheffler, the number one golfer in the world, and we have a very robust app where you can come and I can coach with me. I'll coach you up. I'll take you through
Hmm.
the exercises. There's a nice assessment tool on there, so it's a great company, and I really like what we're doing with Golf Forever.
No, it looks like you guys are crushing it. I saw, it's like in the PGA stores. It looks like people are super, like the golfers like that. They're loving that product. And I was going to ask you, like, so it applies to other, if you're a rotational athlete, you could use it as well. It doesn't have to be just a golfer.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
here's one of the challenges. So the TRX Rip Trainer, we were marketing it to anybody. I mean,
mm,
lacrosse players, tennis players, golfers, baseball players, overhead volleyball, anybody that kind of cocks and loads and coils and
yeah.
unloads. It's a great tool. And even if you've got a back injury and you don't play any sports, just to have that rotational load going
Hmm.
through your center line from different angles, it's really important and valuable. The problem is when you market a product like that,
Hmm.
starts to sound like one of those Ginsu,
Everybody. Yeah.
it dices, grates. It's like, no. So we said, you know what? Golfers, number one, they're rotational athletes. They
Hmm.
understand movement. Surprisingly, they understand biomechanics. You start
Mm,
talking to a golfer, and
yeah.
they'll start talking about throwing out terms like coiled energy and loading phases and balance transfer. And it's like, wow, this is just your average golfer. They really understand biomechanics. But also equally important as a business person, they have a disposable
Sure.
income.
Yes.
They pay $800 for a new driver. They can certainly pay $200 for a Golf Forever swing trainer. So
Hmm.
you can't be naive about the business model
For
either.
sure. Yeah, that's a big part. I listen to a lot of business podcasts now. It's interesting how I've transitioned over time where so much of what I consumed early on was all physical therapy related science kind of content. But now with rehab science, me kind of transitioning to being an entrepreneur and having a business, I listen to so many business podcasts and so much of it is right. Like that is something you have to consider when you are creating an offer, selling a product. You have to choose someone who actually has the money to actually pay for that service or product. So it is something you have to consider. I mean, what does it look I'm so curious, what is your daily life like now? Do you train people anymore? Like are you doing all business stuff with like Golf Forever, and what does it look like?
I mean, now I don't say this to be boastful or arrogant. So
Yeah.
please just and I'll backtrack here a second. So about a year and a half ago, maybe, yeah, 2 years ago, I had a decision to make. I was still doing one-on-ones. I was still
Uh-huh.
doing some physical therapy, and now I'm really doing product development. I was trying to launch a product called the Glute Slide, which, by
Yeah.
the way, is launched now.
Heck
If
yeah. That's amazing.
Man, if you have not checked out, this is my greatest product ever. Go to gluteslide.com. It's awesome. Man, so I'm trying to figure out how to launch this product, and I was kind of at this crossroads, and I said, man, I can launch this and have success, but I have to dedicate
Mm-hmm.
all my time and effort and energy to this product, which is pretty scary right now because
Mm.
I've got royalties, but you don't know what your royalties are going to be from quarter to quarter. You're
Yeah.
just kind of shrugging your shoulders, going, "I hope we keep selling stuff."
Mm-hmm.
And I got to this fork in the road, and I said, "You know what? If not now, when am I going to do it? I don't want to look back when I'm 78, 82 years old, going, gosh, I really should have gone for this new
Mm-hmm.
product, and who knows what would have happened." And so I went for it, and now all I do is focus on this glute slide. I've got other products like the Nautilus Glute Drive, the Golf Forever
Yep.
Swing Trainer, the Escape Barrel. These are all, I get royalties on all these,
Mm-hmm.
and they are marketed by the companies that have licensed them to.
Got it.
The latest product, the Glute Slide,
Mm-hmm.
is my own product. I've got
Mm.
a team, but I'm doing it on my own. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like sink or swim. And
Mm-hmm.
man, one thing you'll relate to this, Tom, is give me a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Make it a competition, right? In business, by the way, there's no bigger competition than
Mm-hmm.
launching a business.
For
So
sure.
all of a sudden, I can't compete anymore in martial arts. I'm old. I'm washed up. I can't, fight anymore. But I can compete in business. And I just lean back into all my competitive,
Yeah.
Taekwondo experiences. And it's like, oh, just wait till they get a load of me. And so now I'm competing in this business. And my day is really magical because I wake up, I bang out some emails, I put some posts up for stuff. I maybe do a demo for the glute slide. Yesterday, I was just doing a demo at a sports performance center. By the way, yesterday, listen to this day. I met John Elway, and I don't know if there's any football fans out there, but if you're from Denver and you meet John Elway, it's like meeting God. I met Joe Sakic. I don't know if there's any ice hockey, competitors out there or people that appreciate the NHL. I met Joe Sakic, a Stanley Cup winner from the Colorado Avalanche, and I went to a movie with my mom,
That's amazing.
which was called Thelma. Great movie if you want to see a movie with your parents, Thelma. Anyhow, but so now my days,
It's amazing.
now granted, there's some days where I'm banging out a 12, 14-hour day.
Mm-hmm.
There's other days where I'm waking up, playing the guitar, and just focusing on what I love to do. And also living a life and spending time with my mom. And that's something that, man, at some point you got to consider. You can't just exchange time for
Mm-hmm.
money, one-on-one. You got to start thinking outside the box and creating another avenue of revenue for yourself, and obviously make it something that you're passionate about.
I love it. There's so much good in there. And I think this is an area I've become really passionate about. Growing up, my parents, being a nurse and a social worker, they went and had their 9 to 5. And that's kind of what everybody did where I grew up in Montana. And it wasn't until I met my wife, and her dad was the CEO of a public company that he started. And so he was the one who said to me, don't trade your time for dollars. And it was kind of my first exposure to entrepreneurship. He was a serial entrepreneur. He had started a magazine in Aspen. He started a pharmaceuticals company in Greenwich. Her parents were from the East Coast. He had started the Aspen magazine, I think was the one he started. So
I've been in that magazine.
Yeah,
For my Ripcore FX.
that's crazy. Yeah, no, he was this serial entrepreneur, and he definitely had times where a business wouldn't work and they lost money, and he was kind of down and out, but then learned lessons from that and kind of kept going. And I learned so much about entrepreneurship from him. And I think exactly what you're saying, my days look a lot like yours now, where I one day can be really busy, and can have a certain types of tasks, emails, creating content, different meetings with companies, and every day varies. But what I love more than anything, and I think the goal for me always was freedom. Like I really wanted freedom. I've got 2 kids that are 10 and 13. I knew I had one life, and I didn't want to trade. I didn't want to look back and regret that I had given up so much time in my life to someone else or someone else's dream or their company. And my kind of vision for it all the time was wanting to help people on a large scale, but also to create freedom for myself so that I wasn't I've never enjoyed, even with things that I like, I don't like to have something where I have to be on this firm schedule. I'd rather each day be a little bit, I thrive on change and kind of the stimulation of that. And I like that each day is different and I have control over it. And I think what you're saying is so huge that if people can just start, I think with content creation now, with the online world, you can create so many, you can just start something new and create these new income streams for yourself. And if you stay consistent with it, I think so much in life is about kind of think of it as a marathon and just consistently showing up. And if you consistently keep showing up, those things compound over time. And then you can start, maybe you can bring in a little bit of income. And then over time that grows. And maybe just like you did, you hit a point where you're like, you have to make that decision of, do I go all in on this? I think everybody hits that point. Like if you do start growing some, this is what happened to me. I was teaching full time at this college here in the spring of 2019. I thought I either have to stay here and go for a tenure track position. I was doing a doctorate of science at Texas Tech. I was like fully in this mindset of I'm going to just be a professor and I'm going to keep teaching. And then as rehab science grew kind of by accident, I hit this point of like, do I really want to keep doing this, or do I want to go this route and go all in on kind of this entrepreneurial journey and make rehab science a business? And it is a little bit of a tough spot, like where you're taking that leap of faith, but man, it has been so worth it. I look back on the days when I was in the clinic seeing patients all day, and I know there are some practitioners out there who like that, but I think there's so many that don't. You don't have control of your time. It can be kind of monotonous. Physical therapy is challenging because a lot of people are in that insurance model, like you spoke about earlier. Patients coming in when they're in pain and injured, it's not, people are often kind of down. They're a little depressed about it. And it's a tough environment. And I hope this is what part of the reason I was so excited to talk to you, because you've done something so unique. And I think that can be really inspiring to the practitioners and professionals out there who are listening to this.
Well, first of all, congratulations, Tom. And I want
Thank you.
to make note to something, because obviously you're glossing over this. This is a podcast, and you're just kind of speaking off the cuff. But the amount of time and effort and energy, I've been following you for a number of years now, and I'm like, man, this guy's content, he doesn't miss. Like every single piece of content has the proper background, has the proper lighting, has the proper text, over like layovers, like everything's on point, and everything you do is professional, and you've created a brand. That's not, so first of all, disclaimer, it's not easy to do. It's not going to
Mm-hmm.
happen overnight. And you said
Yes.
that. You said
Yes.
it's a marathon, right? So I wanted to come on that. So congratulations to
Thank
you,
you.
because you have created that life for yourself. You could be the best teacher in the world, but you're teaching in a different way now. You're
Exactly.
still providing a service. So that was the second point I wanted to make, is that I think a lot of people in the service industry, personal trainers, yogis, Pilates instructors, physical therapists, chiros, like all these people we serve, we have like a Hippocratic oath of our own that we just want to help people. And teachers are another one. We just want to serve the community, and this is all great and fine. And then all of a sudden, you have a medical expense, your car breaks down, your property taxes come, whatever it is, and you're like, man, we're in trouble here a little bit. And I've got a financial obligation to my family, to my, friends, to my parent, like whoever it is that you're in debt to, you've got obligations. So my point here is, don't feel guilty
Yeah.
about trying to make some money.
Exactly.
What you love, like there's nothing wrong. And sometimes I think, Tom, I'm like, man, if I was a hedge fund manager, right, I think I have the intelligence to do anything I want. And so had I gone through that route and I worked at Lehman Brothers or Goldman Sachs or whatever, I'm not kidding. I think I would be a multi-billionaire right now. But that's not my heart. That's
Yeah.
not. I don't want to sit in a computer and look at numbers all day. I want to work with people, and I want to have my impact in the health, fitness, and wellness space.
Yep.
So don't feel bad about making money. Find what you love, and then but just keep in mind, it's not being an entrepreneur. It is like kickboxing. You're going to get kicked in the head with a shin now and again if
Yep.
you get in the ring. And
Yep.
so a lot of it's not for everybody.
Hmm.
So don't like throw all your chips on the table before you really find out, can I do this? Can I sustain this? Do I really love it? But if you do and you lean into it, you can provide a life. And one last thing,
Yeah.
I turned 55 in
You look so good, dude. I keep wondering how old you are.
I turned, it's all smoke and mirrors, man. It's the
Yeah.
I turned 55 in a month.
Wow.
And this process,
Mm.
I think I mentioned earlier, about a year and a half, 2 years ago was when I kind of cut the cord and went full time. So, I'm 52, 53 years into this thing before I've made that change. So just don't put pressure on yourself. I have people come to me all the time. They're like 32 and they're like, I just can't get anything going. Business is so hard. I'm like, bro, you're 32 years old. Okay, you're
Hmm.
a pup. You haven't learned, you haven't put in time enough to come to me with a sob story about how business is so hard and how come I'm not successful on YouTube and this and that. Yeah, every once in a while there's a Haley's Comet that
Hmm.
gets on YouTube and they're 16 years old and they're making seven-figure contracts. But that is
Yeah. It's a rare.
that is not realistic.
Hmm.
Most people, if you look at them, their trajectories, it's taken them years. You just told me you're working for a company called Redcord. I know that company.
Hmm.
You are in the trenches at
Hmm.
trade shows, learning how to sell,
Hmm.
talking to customers, building contacts, understanding products and how they work, understanding how to educate people, probably writing some of the education for this company. Like, you have put in your chops over years. And so just, give yourself some time.
You should. There are so many good insights in there, and I think it's so true. This day and age in social media, where people see other people's successes and or apparent successes, because you don't always see the behind the scenes. You're just seeing the good stuff, and you see some of those really rare situations where people just pop off instantly. I think people sometimes get this illusion that success happens really quickly, and I agree with you so much. I mean, I didn't start on social media till I was 36, and by then I had already been teaching at the undergraduate level for 10 years. I'd been a PT for when I started on Instagram. I'd been a PT for 10 years. I'd already taught for Redcord for 6 years. I'd been you do a bunch of different stuff. And I think sometimes people want to come right out of school and they think I'm just going to start something and blow it up. And they don't. You need to have a certain amount of being in the trenches in that experience before you can really be, I think, where you can bring real valuable insights to patients and clients. And I think that's such a great insight to share. The other part I love that you talked about is that I grew up with for a long time of that mindset that it was wrong to make money, because I always thought of myself as sort of a nonprofit. Like, Rehab Science is a nonprofit organization and I'm just here to help people and it doesn't ever need to make money. And that's how and then I slowly over time transitioned and I realized that, like you said, it's okay to make money. And actually, if I make money doing this, it allows me to make it better and serve more people. And so that's what it's all about.
You just nailed. I was gonna dovetail that. That was like a perfect segue into, like, you're not just doing it for selfish reasons, but once you are in a position, you start to pick and choose. You start to increase your outreach. You start to improve your content. You start to benefit more people. And who knows, Tom, I can see you in 10 years switching to the next phase of your life, which is philanthropy. You
Hmm.
might go into certain programs and doctor PT schools and say, you know what, I want to endow some money to this program. I really like what they're doing here. We're going to improve it. And so, again, put yourself in a position of power and you can serve even more people.
I love it. Dude, this is like I told you, every conversation I get to an hour and I'm like, there's so much we could get into. There's so much. This was just so unbelievable to hear your journey. You've done so many cool things. It's so exciting to me. That's part of the reason I love having this podcast, is that I'm always meeting really interesting people who are doing creative, often entrepreneurial things or thinking outside the box in some way. And I always leave these conversations feeling inspired and just excited, just about like growth and the potential for what can be built. Because I think every time you talk to someone who's doing something interesting, it exposes your mind to something outside. We all have this kind of box of how we look at the world. And I think when you meet people who are doing something different, like talking to you about inventing products, like this is something I've thought about over the years, but you've invented all these different products, and it just, you see the potential that of what can be done, and somebody else has done this and you're like, man, like there's so much more potential and opportunity out there that I could go for. And I just find it so motivating and inspiring. So I thank you so much for just taking the time to be on here. I know you're spending time right now marketing the glute slide, the golf forever. Like, where could people go to learn more about the things you're working on and what you're doing?
Yeah, really, my website's probably the best. It's called PH1 Performance. So PH as in Pete Holman, the number one. Which, by the way, nobody knows this except you will get it. It's for first dawn. I
I
never passed anything back but my first dawn test.
Yep.
And that's a whole nother story. We'll talk about that another
Okay.
time. But ph1performance.com, and then definitely check out gluteslide.com because that's my hot new baby. And I wanted to say one thing because what you commented on something. I'm reading a book now by Stephen Kotler. It's called Flow State. Or I'm sorry, it's not Flow State. It's Art of the Impossible. But it's about flow state. And I'll save you $25.99 on Amazon right now because it comes down to these 4 or 5 things. Curiosity, right? You got to be curious. By the way, if you don't know what flow state is, just Google it. It's like what the X Games athletes and high level, Kobe Bryant and these people get into a flow state where they just can't miss a shot and they're just performing out of this world. It happens with business owners too. It happens in your physical therapy clinic. You ever had that day where you're just like, man, I'm on fire. Like everything I'm doing is working. It gives me goosebumps right now. So it starts out with curiosity, right? Creativity, autonomy, passion, and this one's important, self-mastery. The self-mastery one is a lot of people have some autonomy to do what they want. They have some creativity. They got some curiosity. They're passionate. But self-mastery, that's like the 10,000 hour. That's what we just talked about. Like,
Yes.
it doesn't just happen
In the
overnight.
trenches.
You gotta chisel that piece of granite 1,000 times, and on the 1,001st hit, the granite falls in half, right? So, if you want to get in flow state, sink into these 5 things and, get after it, everybody.
That makes so much sense. I can align with all those, like you saying that, because those times when you get into those flow states, and I can see where all those things came together. Like for a lot of times, me, it would be triggered during exercise with music. I'll hit flow states, and often in those times, I will really go into these kind of creative states where I feel like I can ideate and come up with new things. But it all revolves around already having spent so much time in the trenches, and I think getting a certain level of mastery and understanding around the topic area. The curiosity. I've always been kind of a curious person, love learning, and you can just see where all those come together. So that's so cool. I love that. That's such a great message and piece of wisdom to end on. Pete, thank you so much, man. We'll do another one in the future. Thanks for coming on. This is awesome.
Thanks, brother. All the best to you and your audience, and just really appreciate this platform and this stage, and keep changing lives out there. And reach out to me. I'm on Instagram too, Pete Holman 1 on Instagram. So if you ever need anything, just reach out and I get back to everybody.
That's awesome, man. Thank you. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Bye.